Good evening, everybody. Peace and blessings. Welcome to a very special edition of Conversations with Asia, where we look to empower and educate the women of our communities and the girls that they are raising. I am your host, Asia Nasir Shahid, and welcome guests. This particular episode, the reason why this is a special edition is because this is the first Conversations of Asia where we have men as our guests. As I mentioned just now, our show is all about the theme, the goal is about empowering the women of our communities and the girls that they're raising. So you have always seen women as our guests, but in dealing with empowering women, empowering the girls of our communities is also understanding the men that are in our lives. So whether that be our fathers, whether that be our intimate partners, our sons, brothers, and uncles, they play a huge role in our lives as women. And we're starting to see a trend that has been in the past, something that has been taboo, a conversation that has been taboo, and that is the conversation of men and their mental health. And so there's three things that I want to, basically do this evening, and that is stop dismissing our men's mental health. And that's so important. And I think men have been put in a bad way because we have not talked about this discussion. And so tonight, Conversations with Asia, our intention is to be one of the first to make this a conversation that is no longer taboo for our men and maybe be a beginning of open dialogue for women and the men in their lives. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first guest, and that is Dr. Raymond Brock Murray. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you so
excited
much.
to be making history on Conversations
Yes.
with Asia.
Yes, this is the first. So I am super
Alhamdulillah.
excited to have
Yes.
you. And I'm really looking forward, as you being a psychologist, I'm really looking forward to you bringing some real awareness to a topic and making this something that we can start addressing and really start healing in our homes and really making it for our men to be able to heal, especially men of color. Our next guest is
Correct.
Brother Khalil Ismail.
Assalamu alaikum. How's everyone?
How are you? How are you? And you're coming from, and you're tuning in from.
And I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I actually mentor kids. I actually work with a mental health organization, but I give alternative therapy.
Wow, wonderful. So I'm looking forward to hearing your personal journey and what you've encountered working with the youth in Baltimore. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And last but not least, I have my special guest here. Is a millennial. And I think a lot of times we don't give credit to millennials that they actually have a voice and that they have something to contribute as it relates to something as important as mental health. We're living in very, very different times. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome my youngest son, Alex Ballou.
Hey, what's good? Or Reggie Sinatra. Hey.
So, hey, Alex, how old are you?
21.
21. Wow. I remember those days. So this is, I would like to just jump right into the conversation, being that we have someone who's an adult, a doctor, and a millennial, 21 years old, and how mental health as it relates to our men affects no matter what your age is. So with that being said, Dr. Ray, what can you speak to as it relates to, we hear about it all the time, and I think it's something that we're very comfortable talking about, women dealing with depression and anxiety. Even bipolar disorder has been something that now we recognize as something that women do go through, and it's embraced as something that we need to be sensitive to. Let us know, how is it affecting the men, especially men of color?
Yes. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله على نبينا وعلى صحبه أجمعين. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to begin by departing from the subject just for a second, right?
Okay.
I want people, at least the audience, I want to say one thing to them before we really get into this, right? Which is, when we talk about mental health, right? We're about to have a conversation from, in psychology, what we call the deficit model, right? Where we talk about disorders and issues that people have and things that are going wrong and all of that kind of stuff, right? But I also want to encourage people to understand from the other side of that, which is we're looking at the strengths and the resources that a person has too. Because when we
Right.
talk about mental health, we're not just talking about what's wrong with you. We're also talking about the value of being and staying emotionally healthy, right?
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
it's something that we often overlook because we want to speak to these very big and important issues. And even myself, it wasn't until we all signed on that I realized I should mention this, is that when we talk about encouraging, especially the women who are watching, you want to encourage the men in your life to be mentally healthy, to understand that it's not just about you need to fix your issues, you need to work on whatever's troubling you. Sometimes it's that we just don't know how to live a healthy lifestyle. We don't. When you say people don't know how to be happy, that's really true. Being happy is a skill, and people don't
Absolutely.
really recognize that until they come to counseling. That like being happy is not the absence of sadness, right? I don't have no stress. All my bills are paid. I'm happy. That's not always necessarily so. Being happy and being fulfilled and feeling content, self-acceptance, all of those things are actually things you need to learn how to do if it doesn't come
Hmm.
natural to you, and if it wasn't taught to you, as a young man or a young woman, because it's common sense, but it's hard to practice. You know what I mean? A
Absolutely.
lot of people recognize the good in themselves, but they don't feel the good in themselves, right? And
Right.
so, I just wanted to make that point before I got into my actual comments. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Oh no, thank you.
So when you talk about issues like, okay, yes, alhamdulillah. So again, when you talk about issues like depression and anxiety, those kinds of things, which tend to be the most common disorders, right?
Hmm.
That's like each of them is like 10%, 13% of the population, right? In general, right? But that's a lot when you consider if it was 10 people in the room, two of those 10 people would be having either anxiety or depression, or sometimes a mix of both of them. That's a lot
Right.
of people, right? Um, and so when you talk about, and a lot of that is overrepresented when you think about women. A lot of those
Right.
numbers are women, but when you talk about men, men go underdiagnosed a lot, right? And so when we see smaller numbers among men, go ahead.
No,
I
keep
thought you had a
going. I'm
comment. Sorry.
listening.
So when you see smaller numbers among men, it's not necessarily because fewer men are affected by these issues. Number
Hmm.
one is because men underreport it, right? A man might not necessarily, and it's not to say that we hide in it, is that sometimes we're not that familiar with what's going on within us,
Hmm.
right? A lot of times in therapy, I'll ask a man, how do you feel about such and such a thing? What do you think about such and such a thing? How do you think it affects you? And a lot of them, you just hear a lot of silence, right? Because this is the first time they're even just trying to process the fact that somebody asked them, how is something affecting you, right? Like, I don't know. I never even, and they take 30, 40 seconds and then say, I have no idea.
Hmm.
I never really
Hmm.
thought about how it affects me. And then as we start to talk more, we start to see the evidence of how it comes out, right? And they said, well, I
Absolutely.
guess I guess it was, and it never occurred to me. And so it's not that men are underreported. It might be that they don't have the language. And then the other side of it is that as um, we don't define it in terms that might be prevalent in men. Like for instance, I always use the other side of it, which is aggression, right? If we were to say are women as aggressive as men, we would naturally say no, right? Because if we defined it as kicking, punching, yelling, intimidation, all of those kinds of things, women don't do that as much as men. I typically do it, right? Like verbal, interpersonal stuff, social stuff, then we see acts of aggression and intimidation in women that typically characterize aggression and passive aggression, social aggression among women of what it looks like, right?
Hmm.
And so you might find that if you expand the definition a little bit, you'll capture more people. And this is the same thing with men who are dealing with issues, right? Is that if you just expand the definition some more to capture what it looks like in men, you'll find more men fitting inside those categories. But
Right.
then the third thing to consider too is that when we talk about mental health, I think a lot of times we get caught up in diagnostic terms, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, all of those kinds of things. But not everybody fits into that mold, right? You
Okay.
don't have to have a disease, biologically. You don't have to have a physical disease to be physically unhealthy, right? Does that make sense? You don't have to
Or
have cancer. Please.
does that mean like if there's a man who's dealing with just something that he's going through, does that mean that he's not necessarily dealing with a mental illness, meaning anxiety? He may be feeling anxiety for a particular situation, but not necessarily that he is dealing with a diagnosis of chronic
Correct.
anxiety or depression.
Clinical. That's what I'm trying to say, right? And a
Okay.
lot of times when we use that as our criterion, we overestimate how well we're doing, and we don't recognize how we're feeling,
Mhm.
right? And so actually, believe it or not, men are dealing with mental and emotional stress at similar rates as women. But because culturally how we experience them, the gender specifics around how we're socialized in terms of expressing it, and then as men, I think that we normalize it, right? We live with it, and it becomes something that we are accustomed to. It's
So
like
it
you
just
don't hear the
becomes
traffic that passes by your house.
right. So
Correct. We
you
we we become accustomed to something that's unhealthy, and so we take it for granted that it's normal, and it's not.
so that brings me to the question that I want to ask Brother Khalil. Being that you're older and have had experience with, different things from being teenagers, and being a teenager brings its own level of stress, adult, marriage, and now you have children as well. Has that been your experience, which is what Dr. Ray was just explaining, which is, have you had experience with some form of mental stress, or anxiety, and what has that been like for you? We're not able to hear you, Brother Khalil.
I'm sorry, I had muted, so
Okay.
I distracted. Um, so since I was a child, I can recall, and I didn't know what it was at the time because I didn't know the terms or anything like that. But when I started working with mental health professionals, I realized now what it was. But when I was ever since I was a child, I was an empathic, sensitive kid. You know what I mean? I felt pain a lot. Um, Many times I couldn't get out the bed. Like I would go
Mm,
days where it would be very difficult to get out of the bed because I'd be dealing with something that, I was constantly anxious about things. Really kind of in a lot of ways, what saved me was that I was very into sports. And so sports would motivate me sometimes to get up. But sometimes there are a lot of things that I wouldn't do or I would pass up because, I just didn't feel good.
mhm.
Right. As a child, that would happen to me a lot. Right. I didn't necessarily know what it was, but all I knew is that I had to be tough. Right. I was required to be tough, and I was required to do my responsibility and my duties in my household. And that was that. So there was just a level of which, when that happened, I just got up and did that. So I would go through these stages. So when I got older, when I got to the point where I had an option, for example, when I was in college, when I had an option to, sit around and not do anything, that's what I would do. So I would
Mhm.
literally go days where I would just sit down and sometimes not do anything, or I would escape through trying to play video games, something where I had to do the minimal
Didn't
of.
have to think.
Right, right, right. And it wasn't until I, now at the same time being conscientious and being a Muslim really helped me because I didn't want to be a loser in a lot of ways. And so for me, spirituality became the way that I started to conquer those types of issues. Right. So I started learning about Sunnah and Dua and things like that. And it kind of helped me. But at the time, before I knew about that stuff, I had a I had a very up and down kind of thing where I'd be really high one day and then really low the next day, and a lot of that would happen a lot. you know, and it wasn't until I got older I learned how to control my mind and control in such a way where I could actually get things done and lead family and that type of thing. But it was a process. It's been a process. And sometimes, you know, when I go through things, I still have very anxiety moments and things like that. But now I have the tools to deal with it.
Did you feel like what Dr. Ray said, that a lot of times it just goes unspoken? Did you feel like there were moments where, you know, being married, your wife being more transparent and saying, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling, you know, anxiety or something? Did you feel that there were times that you felt that and that you just were not in a position to express it?
I remember early in marriage, and this actually has to do with the fact that I watched my parents and they used to argue a lot. So I knew I said I was never going to argue or never wanted to argue. That was a vow I made when I got married early in life. So a lot of times if my wife expressed something, I wouldn't necessarily express it the way that I felt it when she would express, because I didn't want to be a person who created the argument, right? But that created stress for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That created stress because I was not expressing myself and I was thinking that was a good thing. And I was taught actually, you know, to not argue with women and to not do stuff like that. So I thought that I didn't know, I didn't have the tools to have the actual good conversation. So instead I would just say, well, I'm just going to take this. I'm going to deal
Take
with
this
it.
on.
I'm going to take the blame. And I used to just take the blame. A lot of times I would just take the blame. All right, it's just my fault. Let's just move on. But you know, when things kind of happen to where I you know, we realized that, okay, you know what, I can't do it that way. And I wasn't even being fair, I think, to my wife at that point when we realized that, okay, you know what, I have to also learn how to express in a way that's healthy. You know what I'm saying? Because I only saw extremes as a kid a lot.
Right. So going back to what Dr. Ray said, he said sometimes it would manifest. Am I saying that correctly? That because you didn't articulate it, or because men most of the time don't articulate it, sometimes it'll manifest in another way. Is that correct, Dr. Ray?
That's
So
correct.
did that happen with you? Did that happen with you, Khalil, where
It
you found that it manifested?
it manifested in me in the form of escape, where some people they're confrontational. My form was more escape. You know, I'm going to find a little hole or a place to go and be by myself, right? And go do something that gets my mind off of it, right? That was my form of it, I think. And ever since I learned that as a child, because I saw, you know, certain things. I saw very harsh conversations as a child, and I hated that. I hated the conflict of the thing, right? So it manifested in escape. And I got conflict out through sports. So I didn't have to deal with a lot of that. So because I played sports, that was what balanced me out. And so I had this kind of, it's interesting, it's kind of I was kind of a paradox to a certain extent, because in a way, you know, sports made me tough, right? And I loved the concept of being tough. As a boy, you love being tough. You want to be known as being tough. So sports made me tough. But inside, I feel everything. I feel everything. I feel like that's just the way that I'm created, right? And so the way that I would deal with that is I would escape through some, you know, mechanism, whether harmful or not, right? Or, you know, I find some outlet through sports, which in many ways that was good, but it wasn't necessarily dealing with the internal issues that were occurring that were maybe were hurting me.
Got you. Wow. So yeah. So sometimes well, I'll get back to that because I wanna ask Dr. Ray about that.
Okay.
So Alex, I wanna go now to Alex. Have you experienced that where you have felt either depression, anxiety, or you know, stress on a high level, and you kind of suppress that because of being a male?
Yeah, definitely at different timings. I feel like there's definitely is like a distinct between when you know definitely you have a depression and like you get that feeling where it's like I feel depressed or anxiety. But I feel like once it's like usually, especially society, how it is when you work and people usually they have something that's going on in their life, like social media. And if you do tune into those stuff like a lot, like if you are into it, it can bring you down like really bad. So I think like a combination of those stuff, I think has brought me sometimes to those, like to feel a certain time like really anxiety or depressed. Especially I feel like work is one that's like pushes you on the edge.
So you mentioned something because you're in that millennial range, that age, that generation. And so, you know, millennials are really into social media. They're really into that, really into watching what everybody's doing. You mentioned that in and of itself brings a level of stress or some form of anxiety. In what way has that been that way for you or males in general?
When you tune into, I feel like other males that are doing something that you want to do in your life, like if you're like a music artist and you're looking at other music artists that are like where you at, where you want to be in life, or you're looking at like someone who's for example, maybe a bodybuilder and they're like at the body that you want to be at, or you can't like feel like you can't achieve it yet. You might end up looking at that person or feeling like you're not where you want to be at yourself, so you end up feeling like your life is like basically your life is not, I guess, as good as the other person, so you feel like you're not really like equal. And not saying I feel like this, but I know like a lot of people I've talked to have felt this certain way. Like they've been like, I feel like other people like I have a better life compared to mine.
That's interesting because I work with girls and I work with women, and that is something that women often do, which is do comparison. You know, my body doesn't look like this, and so there's a level of stress.
And even
Sometimes,
wealth. I know sometimes like wealth, like with money, how much a man has money or how much change or something like that, or cars. Like sometimes another male will look at that, and I know sometimes like old friends I used to have, they used to like talk about that in group chats. Like they used to just nonstop talk about like how another male had like a excessive amount of accessory.
so that's what I was saying. So women, I know we do that. If a woman is married to a certain person, you know, women compare themselves. If they live in a certain place, they dress a certain way. If their body is shaped a certain way, we as women do a lot of that. And you know, especially when I deal with the adolescents and the young girls. So Dr. Ray, I want to ask you, being that I'm very familiar with that, I was one of those girls who grew up with low self-esteem, making comparisons all the time. Is that a very common thing amongst men? Even out of the millennial generation, is that they come to a point in their life as men that they're looking at someone else and making some type of comparison as to where they should be as men in life?
Yes, we just don't talk about it. Because who am I going to tell? I'm going to tell my friend who's the one I'm comparing myself to and who I feel like is probably doing better than me. Am I going to tell my wife who I feel like is part of what I'm insecure about? You know, I was just with a couple the other day, and you know, the wife says, you know, he doesn't want to really spend time with me with the things that I like to do. Whenever I say I want to go out for a walk, he doesn't want to go for a walk. I like to walk and look at nice houses. And he despises that.
Right.
Right. And, you know, it comes out that, you know, he doesn't like to look at those houses, da, 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 and it comes out like because I feel like, you know, maybe I'm not good enough. Right. And that's not what she's thinking. She enjoys it. She said, I just like to look and enjoy. I don't want a house that big. I don't want a house that nice. You know what I mean? I just think they're beautiful and I admire them. But for him, he's internalizing it in a different way. He doesn't want to spend time with her when she wants to do those things. And when he's not vocalizing why, he's just like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't do that. And then he will present to her some other reason, like, you know, what she's doing is maybe materialistic or just wasting time. You know what I mean? We find ways to kind of, yes, instead of saying, listen, you know, the reason why I don't go is because I feel like maybe when you look at those things and what we don't have, maybe you look at me differently or you feel dissatisfied with me. You know, because that takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable like that. You know, because when you say it, it makes it real. It's not just something that you're battling with and you can pretend doesn't exist in your head. Once you say it, now people know. And they have to be responsible with your heart over that. You know what I mean? And that's very it's like jumping out of an airplane.
And can I add that when that happens a lot with us, especially sometimes especially with I feel like sometimes with our wives or women in their lives, they've also been trained to be like, listen, you know, that don't mean it's to dismiss it, to be honest. Like that's not my problem. Right.
Or we feel like, well, if it's, or we feel, or really, you know, speaking for the women, sometimes I think we're dismissive in another way and not even realizing it. And that's where we just kind of like, I don't feel that way. Like, don't even think like that. And it's like, you know, but we really are not listening how deep that feeling is
Mm-hmm.
for that man. Like, I mean, I'm listening to my son and I'm like, I mean, I've known my son his whole life, and I did not realize until this conversation how deep that goes for a man. I know what it does for us as women, you know, looking at women and how, yeah, we think if we go to this place or that place, our husband will see a woman shaped a certain way. So no, we will avoid that. I didn't know men actually would, even to looking at houses or cars, and we're just window shopping, as so to speak, but a man internalizes that and feels inadequate because he's making those that just blew me away. That just totally blew me away.
Much of our feelings of inadequacy, at least in my opinion, Allah knows best, but is around responsibility and our inability to be responsible. We want to actually really want to be. So it might not be like the physical stature, but it has the same effect. You know what I mean? If we feel like we are not who we need to be as men, it'll come out in many unhealthy ways.
So I want to ask, and I'm just opening this up to all of you. Have you as men been in a position at one point or another, whether it was with your wife, whether it was your parent, sibling, co-worker, just anyone, where you've been in a situation where you actually kind of, as you was talking about, Dr. Ray, said it out loud, was vulnerable, and it was received negatively?
I'm sorry. I'll save the brothers. I'm seeing the smiles. Like,
yeah, I'm like, I asked y'all before the show, is there anything off limits? And y'all said no, so I'm asking.
Hold on.
I'll be honest.
Blink twice if you're not safe. Okay?
I was giving the expert an opportunity to go first.
Yeah.
That's all.
You got it.
Yeah. Wink your left eye if she's in the room.
Yeah.
No.
So who would like to go first?
I'll go first. So
okay.
And here's how I'll say it, because I don't want to make it a blame thing. I actually think that, and what I've actually learned is that we kind of have to also lead, at least as a man. I've learned that I have to lead in showing how to receive me. Right. I also have to articulate and express how to receive me too, right? And express and make sure, because I have to be conscious of the reality of the society and the culture that I live in, and the fact that it's not taught to receive maybe those inner, what appears to be softer feelings that we have. People aren't taught to receive those. So when we give those, you know, we give that, and we feel any little bit, because if we feel any little bit, and this is why I'll take the blame a little bit, if we feel any little bit of, I would say, coldness to it, then immediately I'm going to recede, and I'm going to go back to putting on a wall.
Retreat.
I'm going to retreat, right? I'm going to go to I'm going to put a wall up, right? Because I'm also afraid of your response, right? And so what I've learned also is I have to have sabr with the response as the leader, right? That, and then be like, okay, this is how I need you to receive that. This is something that I've had to learn and am still learning. That you understand what I'm saying? So yes, I think that I have received that, and I think I have given that too, right? And I think that happens a lot of times when we don't understand each other.
Right.
And I'm gonna say that, and the reason I'm gonna say that, because I don't want to make it like, okay, it's not a victim thing. I think it's really a lot of time when two people really don't understand, it's really more of an understanding. We have to learn.
Right. Alex, you wanted to thank you for sharing that, because I think that is such an important aspect. Is, you know, we say it all the time as women, you got to teach people how to treat you. But men, it's the same thing. You have to teach, especially because it is something that is not talked about. We are having a discussion that has been taboo for so long. It's sometimes we don't know how to receive a man being vulnerable. We want to be there. We want to be receptive to that. But sometimes we don't know how to receive that particular man and what he needs in that moment of being vulnerable. So that's a great point of a man taking that leadership and saying, this is how I need to be received. So Alex, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I want to throw something out though. Before a man can teach you how to treat him, someone has to teach him how to teach someone that, because a lot of men,
Exactly.
again, are struggling with vulnerability, don't have the language to communicate it in the first place. You know what I mean? Like somebody's got to get him to that place to be able to do that,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of men will just give up. You know
Right.
what? I don't know what to say to you. I don't know how to tell you what I'm going through, and so just forget it.
Right. So I want to get to that point because that was going to be my next question to you,
Mm.
Dr. Ray, is how then can we, because I invited the wives and I invited women to invite their husbands, their sons, their uncles, their brothers. I would love for you to talk more about that.
Yeah.
But I want to get to Alex. Has
Hmm.
that happened to you where you have been in that vulnerable state and maybe, as Dr. Ray was saying, not knowing how to articulate how to receive you, it's been received in your vulnerability in a negative way?
You mean like I had like a negative reaction?
No,
Like,
someone else had a negative
oh,
reaction
okay.
to your vulnerability. And
Yeah,
you felt like, oh, that's the last time I'll do that.
yes. I was gonna, and the thing is though, I can't, like, same thing like you had said. I can't fully put the blame because also, like, to this, sometimes people are not like taught how to like react to that, like react to how basically what you said, like react to how we're being vulnerable to them. So it's them being vulnerable, also how they were raised up. So maybe they had a parent or a father or something like that was in their life that didn't treat them the way that, or give them the same the right type of parenting that should have been right. So they didn't get the right way that they should have reacted towards it. So I've been in that situation, which I think that's kind of what it was. I don't think the person had the right way to react towards me being vulnerable, and it just ended kind of bad. So and
Did
then
you, has that affected you, Alex, though, in moving forward in being vulnerable? Have you
yes,
had more of a
because
struggle in being vulnerable because of it?
yes, slightly, just because sometimes it's either now questioning if the person in the relationship is going to be actually like 100% in the relationship or be honest, or two, that if I'm going to be doing anything wrong, like if I did anything wrong in the relationship, or if maybe I'm like looking at it in the wrong way, or if I'm looking at it 100% the right way.
So you start second guessing yourself.
Yeah, basically, instead of like second guessing, now I'm like fully second guessing instead of being like maybe my intuition is right or something.
Mm. So, Dr. Ray, I would like to ask you, being that both of them said they didn't, Brother Khalil and Alex, express not, and we're talking about two different generations struggling with the same thing of, and as Brother Khalil said, he's learned but still learning. What advice can you give? Being that you brought up such a great point, is that we've never had someone teach a lot of our young men, especially men of color, where we're raised in single parent homes more than other ethnicities. Unfortunately, what would be your recommendation in how they can articulate vulnerability in a way that they would be able to receive it in a more positive way?
Where the person may receive it in a more positive way.
Or how they can teach
Um,
someone to receive them.
yeah. So, all right, let's start the show all over again, then, right? Because that's so much
Mm.
for a person. This is step one, right? Because that what you're talking about is several steps after the work that somebody might first need to do, right? First and foremost, you got to see the benefit and understanding what's going on within yourself in the first place,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we're not going to look within ourselves, because what we might find in there, we already know. Number one, we already know. Allah, He says, "بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَىٰ مَعَاذِيرًا." Verily, a mankind is a witness over his own self, even though he might put forward excuses.
Mm,
So we know what's going on within ourselves on
mm.
some level. On some level, even if we're not intimately aware, on some level we know we ain't right. We know we don't feel good. We know something's going on, right? So we want to turn away from that, because what we might find is painful or difficult to acknowledge or embarrassing, or there's a lot of dread or fear, whatever it is. And so we need an incentive to look at it, right? We need a reason why. And the reason why is that, again, that healthy emotional living part. It's so much more beneficial to cut this stuff out, to take it out and be rid of it, and to be done with it, to move on, to heal, to get past it. Because it does spread and it harms you if you don't work your way through it. Number one. So, and to be willing to ask yourself, what's going on within me? What am I thinking and feeling right now? What's the reality of it?
Right.
Right? And for better or for worse, I can accept what I find. If I find something I like, I can help it grow. If I find something I don't like, I have the power to change that. Right? And to start to understand it and to not fear it, but to see the beauty and the benefit of doing it. Right? And again, Islamically, right, we can't be anything in the Quran that Allah swears by. Right? We can't be the sun, we can't be the moon, we can't be the stars, we can't be time, we can't be any of those things. But there's one thing in the Quran that Allah swears by that we can be, and it's nafsul lawama. It's the self-reproaching soul. It's the individual who takes an honest look within themselves.
Introspection.
Right? That's right. And the good and the bad that you find in there, you do something about. Right? That's the one thing that Allah swears by that we can be. And so that's step number one before you start to even talk to someone else. Right? Let me just even look within myself. Then number two is let me start to find the words to describe what I'm feeling. Because sometimes we don't have the vocabulary. Everything makes me mad. But it's not everything makes me mad.
Right.
Right? Or everything's annoying. Like when you talk to young people, they say, oh, that's annoying. And they don't mean annoying. Annoying has like 19 different meanings. Right? And so, I remember once, I'm sorry to drag this out, but I want to drag it out to some degree. When I was at Rutgers, I was working with this woman, and she was like maybe 29, 28. And she came in and she was a doctoral student, PhD in a research laboratory. So she's all like numbers and lab rats. And so her mind does not work like just kind of regular psychology person, even though she's in psychology. She's in the science part of psychology. So when she comes in and she's talking about like something's not right, I don't know what's going on, something's not right. The more I talk to her, the more I find she doesn't have the language to describe what's going on. And so I gave her a printout of like feeling words. So it was like sad, happy, anxious, angry, and like all of the different degrees. So it started from low to very intense. And for each one of those categories. And she went home and she studied, she's a doctor student. So she went home and she studied it. And her life like just changed.
Opened up because now she was able to articulate what she was feeling in real language that people could relate and understand.
It was so like how would you do a whole other person?
So if someone, with my son being the age that he's in, and I want to address a couple of things that's happening, and even with someone like Khalil's age who might have never seen that before or had some form of trauma with being, vulnerable, and seeing how that worked out as a child, and maybe they're not in a position to go to counseling, maybe financial reasons or whatever. What would you suggest someone do in order for them to do the self-work?
Number one, take a long walk. Be by yourself. Don't be afraid to be alone with yourself. Right? And that gives you enough time to actually look in. Don't be so busy all the time.
Right. Yeah, because busy allows you to not,
Yes, being busy helps and it's constructive, but also gets in the way of you doing your process work. You know what I mean? And so take a walk in the park, just walk around the park. I do a lot of stuff, believe it or not. I park far away when I go to Walmart, park at the end of the lot and just walk into the door. And that's my time, that 3-4 minutes, I'm all in my head the whole time. Right? And so don't be afraid to do that. And so I try to move quickly now. Right? So, but then you got to find somebody in your life who can I trust, who has in the past protected whatever I've expressed to them and about
and
what's going on
safe.
with me. Yes. And so maybe that's a person I can start to talk to. And even to say, like, look, sometimes I want to talk to you just to get stuff off my chest. I don't know what it's going to be. I'm not going through nothing right now. But I just want to let you know, is that all right if I I call you every once in a while and just kind of talk and kind of get stuff out there. You know what I mean? And like let them know that that's what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what's somebody gonna say? But yes, right? Let's walk and talk. Let's go and do whatever, right? The weather's nice. Let's just take a walk out and just chill with each other. Just go shoot some shots, right? Whatever we do, that's like number 4 or 5 down on the list, right? But then one of the biggest things is to tell people what you want, right? If I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to you, I just want you to listen. If I'm talking to you, I want advice. If I'm talking to you, I just need a shout. If I'm talking to you, just tell me if I'm crazy. Right? Like tell people what
What you
your
need.
expectation is coming into the
Mm-hmm.
conversation. Because as somebody who cares about you, I'm automatically default going to go to make you feel better. And sometimes
Right.
somebody trying to make you feel better feels invalidating, which frustrates you. But that's because they don't know what else to say. You talking to me,
And
you're
they don't
upset.
know what you need. Right. Right. Wow. This is some really good
Correct.
pointers.
And but that means you got to know what you want and then present that to the person. Here's what I really need. I don't need you to try to help me solve it. I just need you to sit and listen, right? And let a person do that. Just sit and listen. And if a person says, "Look, man, that's too much. I can't sit and listen. I can't hear this stuff and not respond." Okay, then you got to figure out if you can listen to them, respond back a little bit. But then the other thing of that is, um, you don't have control over how somebody responds,
Mm-hmm.
right? Be careful of how you internalize how somebody responds. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
responding in a way that disappoints you doesn't mean that they don't love you, they don't care about you, they don't whatever you thought, right? Sometimes they're overwhelmed,
Right.
right? Sometimes they're really overwhelmed, or their heart is broken. They love you so much, they're speechless, and they don't know how. I've learned in therapy. Sometimes somebody say something to me, I don't know what to say. First thing I say is, I don't even know what to say, and the person is like, "Oh, I'm so disappointed." You're like, right, right. You know what I mean? And so, you know
Right.
what I
But we're
mean? Like
having
just
that
being
dialogue. We're having an honest dialogue about that.
correct. And so just being genuine with the person in the moment that's coming to
Mm-hmm.
you, say like, "Oh my God," you know what I'm saying? Like I don't, my heart is breaking. I'm holding back tears, just trying to. I'm sorry you're going through that. Like sometimes, whatever it is, just respond to the person with what you're feeling. But the other side of that, and I'm sorry it takes so long, is that women say that men need to be more expressive. But this is like I tell the Muslims all the time: don't just make dua for what you want. Ask Allah to make you ready for what you want,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Right.
women want a man to be expressive, and then when a man is expressive, they don't know how to respond to it,
Right. Right.
right? And so the
Right.
man is
That's
like,
true.
"Well, I'm never
I'm never gonna open
bringing
up
this."
again. That's that.
No, 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 because it was hard enough for me to do it in the first place. And you
Hmm.
know what I mean? If I got to teach you how to do it, I'm going to internalize that and all these negative ways about the efforts you should be putting in to get there with me. And you know what I mean? And so like women should actually learn how to do this. We need to have classes on this stuff, but
So I want
I
to
don't know,
get to
I've
that.
covered a lot of bases.
Yeah, so I want to get to that, but before we do that, I wanna ask a question to Khalil and to Alex. Um, we're living in some very uh, trying times, very unprecedented times. We have COVID. COVID has put a spin on a lot of things as it relates to work. And Alex, you mentioned that being in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace now is just, it's always been a place that's, it can be stressful, not always, but can be.
Mm-hmm.
But COVID has brought on a whole nother spin of, it being a
Mm-hmm.
stressful place because if someone comes with COVID, now everybody's quarantined. It affects you being able to work. The way you have to work now, it's completely changed. Being also that you are African American men that are looking at what's happening around the world today with not just what we call black on black crime. We see that, and it has increased, and I mean, young black men are shooting each other because they just didn't like the way the person looked at them. I mean, that has increased. But now we're in a whole nother epidemic, which is the high rate of black men being killed by those that are hired and paid to protect and serve in our community. And so I wanted to ask you, has that played a role in some level of stress or anxiety or even depression? Has that played a role in your current lives right now? And well, I'll just ask that question first. And whoever wants to answer,
I guess I'll start. The to at least start with COVID. That's already like I feel like more stress on us because it's like more it's stress on everybody. Just more of the mask part, the whole having to worry about the next person next to you might have COVID, might get sick, and also just in general like the whole after quarantining for so long, it's kind of made some people like even myself too like sometimes now when you're now like exposed to social events and forced to talk to people, it almost feels a little bit it feels different compared to like before. I don't know if it's like for everybody. It feels like a little bit different afterwards. And then with work, it's more of like, at least this is how has been even before COVID. I feel like they make you work almost every day and almost every hour. And it's like after you've worked one day, you go back to the same day. And there's that saying that every day, if you do something every day, it becomes insanity. It almost feels like that because if you feel like you're doing something every day, like the same job, and it's like the same thing, and then you just go home and you sleep and then go back to the same job, it eventually feels like you're eventually feel like almost doing the same thing. It almost feels like you're losing your mind. But that I feel like that's at least to deal with that, or at least why it's like stressful and it builds anxiety or depression. And then at least with the police and the black on black crimes, I feel like that's a problem with us at least, or main problem because if you live your life in fear 24/7. Like you don't know when you walk out the door, like this might be my last time being alive. Like
is that a question that you actually, is that a thought process that you actually have, Alex, every time you walk out the door?
I do. Sometimes I do. Like I'm not gonna lie. There's times where I've walked out the house being like this. Like usually you have to like prep yourself. Like you never know. Like I'm gonna you still have to enjoy your day. Like you can't be like in fear, but you have to know like if you go outside, you have to be like I have to at least ready myself to like if I get stopped by a police officer, he has a chance that he might stop me. He might pull his gun out. He might do like certain things. Like there's even videos of there's a video that I saw recently of the kid who was walking in a snowstorm, and that used to be me while coming home from work, and he got pulled over from a police officer. And that put fear into me because that's me coming home every day from work. So that could be easily me just doing the same thing.
When you see a cop car, is there a level of anxiety that grows in you when you see a cop drive by you? To be honest,
not every time, but I'm not gonna lie. When the car slows down, when it does like I guess when they decide to like want to check you but not pull over, those are the times where it almost like you're like, okay, like this might turn into something.
Wow. And you're only 21 and you're already feeling that level of stress and anxiety just from the sight of a cop. Khalil, what is that like for you? How has that affected you with COVID? Has that brought on some level of anxiety? And, with the high rate of Black men being killed by police, has that affected your level of anxiety, depression, or stress?
Well, I mean, since I've been a child, honestly, I've been a person who's very concerned with the world and the state of the world. So I've always been a community person, a person who's done a lot in the community, wanted to be a help for the community. Study our people and why we have our plights, and obviously, and in police violence, the real difference between the police violence of today and yesterday is that we filmed it. The reality is that these murders have been happening for. I mean, you can literally pull up a speech of Malcolm X and he can describe a scene that happened last week, right? Malcolm X spoke about the scene because it was happening then. So for me, but I will say this. I remember when I was trying to avoid watching the George Floyd thing, but when I actually saw a picture of scrolling down my timeline, and the foot was on his neck, and I threw something, and anger and tears came out of me at the same time. Anger, tears, all at the same time, and I knew that this was affecting me more than I would let on, because it's not that I don't spend time. For me, and my Islam informs me not to spend time. Allah told us what this world was going to be. So for me, I'm not surprised about any of it. And I, to be honest, every day I think about the fact that I could die. I worry about my family. I worry about
I was gonna say that right after.
Yeah. I worry more probably about my family. I'm gonna be honest. I spend time. My pending death is worried more with respect to what's going to happen with the people that I love than it actually is with me, right? but I'm angry about injustice. You know what I'm saying? Probably more than I let on. I don't, and so I spend a lot of time actually trying to make sure that I recognize those things in prayer, and I spend a lot of time trying to do things about what's going on in society. Also, even to help me, right? Because it's a lot, and for me, I've been this way since the time. So I carry a lot. I carry a lot inside, and so because I carry a lot, I have to do a little bit of extra walking. Like as my brother said, I got to do a little bit of extra playing ball. I have developed mechanisms to do a little extra because I carry a lot inside. I have to, in order, and I have to express. So I'm expressive actually. I tend to be very expressive because I've learned that that's the way to be. But I also know that this religion also requires sabr, right? If there's any one particular, one particular trait that I'm really working on is that. What does it mean to be expressive, but also to be conscious of the person that I'm expressing to? What does it mean to actually, be disciplined, but at the same time to make sure that I'm not holding in something that's going to hurt me later? What does that mean? I'm constantly exploring those things because I carry a lot, and I know I have no choice. I feel like I would literally probably self-destruct it if I didn't. So Islam really helps me a lot. But yes, to put it like this, to put it in a nutshell, just about describing that scene when it was just a time where I just saw something scrolling down my timeline. And as a matter of fact, I tell you, and the last thing I'll say is this: I watched the Judas and the Black Messiah movie, and when I watched that at the end, that was another time when my friend was saying, I was at the movie at a private screen. I literally smashed the cup that was in front of me. So I didn't used to do that. So the fact that I'm having these reactions says that no matter how much I'm applying, I know that there's stuff inside. So I got more work to do inside. You know what I mean?
Wow. So these things, I mean, I know how it's affecting us as women. I know how it's affecting children with school. Being that we are, this show is about empowering and educating women. I would love each of you, because we're fasting, and I want to make sure that we conclude, for you to be able to break your fast. I want to ask each and every one of you, being that you're walking into a world, like Alex said, just walking and seeing a cop slow down brings a level of anxiety. I know when I drive my car, even as a woman, and a cop is behind me, I get nervous. I remember a cop stopped me before, and I was literally shaking. So I know what that's like. And the cop had to tell me to relax, everything was okay, and he could see that I was so visibly shaken just by him stopping me. So the question that I have is, being that we're looking to educate women for us to be more empowering to the men in our life, I'll go from Alex to Khalil and then to Dr. Ray. What advice, if you're being vulnerable right now, right? If you're being vulnerable right now, Alex and Khalil, what would you say to the women in your life, and what would you say to women in general to be able to receive you in a way that you can be more open to sharing and expressing? What would that look like for you, and what would you say?
Wait, what do you mean? I'm sorry.
What would you say to? Oh, so I'll let Khalil answer, and maybe that will help you understand the question.
If there's one thing that I would say this for me. I would just say this to the sisters or the women. I know your nature may be to have intuition and to look beyond what's being said. But when a man is actually striving to be vulnerable with you, don't assume he's saying something other than what he's saying. Don't assume he's saying something other than what he's saying. We tend to, as men, say what we actually are. We're not saying something else. That intuition that you have is good for certain things. It sometimes allows you to solve problems that we don't see, right? But when we are in the space where it's time for us to talk, that's not the time to then take what we say and turn it into something else, because that can destroy a whole lot when you do that. So that same gift that you have that you shouldn't lose, right? There is a time and place to actually sit and listen and not turn that on. Otherwise, you could actually really get wrong something that's right. That's what I would say.
because that moment is a moment of that man being vulnerable. So you just have to let him say what he's saying and take it on face value is what you're saying, and then respond to it accordingly based on the actual words that was said. So I saw Dr. Ray
Yeah.
shaking his head when you were talking, like, yes, what I said what I said, right?
That,
I
you
was
know how
about to
you are
storm
as
out
women.
and talk.
I was gonna say, you know how you are as women have a time when y'all don't want the problem to be solved. I think maybe sometimes your intuition is that same thing, your version of that.
Right.
But that's the time for you not to solve the problem, even if you're right, because he has a process. He needs to go through his process just like everybody else. He's not just going to get there. So he might come to the conclusion that you had. You got to let him come to. If you
To
see
that
him taking
conclusion
that
on his
step,
own.
he needs to come to that. And many
Right.
times he knows himself more than you would realize.
So Alex, coming from a younger generation, you're 21. You're obviously very much still trying to process your own feelings. What advice would you give to your sister, your niece, your mom, or a woman in your life when you're being vulnerable in that moment? What's the message that you would like for the women in your life to understand, or just women in general, when you, as a younger man, still obviously trying to find himself at 21? What thoughts would you say?
I guess the only thing I would say was, I guess, like, be like, just really listen to like what we have to say. Like, I mean, you guys do, but like really listen to like what we have to say, and like be like fully honest with like be not honest, but like, what's the word, like, be prepared to hear like an honest answer, because sometimes the honest answer might be something sad, like, or something that like might be hurtful, and not even like on some like foul like cheating thing. It could be like legit, even how he feels emotionally. Like, he might be like, I feel a certain way, and I feel like you do this, and then she might take it and be like offended by it. So it'd be like, be prepared for at least an honest answer at the end, and be prepared at least to be prepared to at least give a, what you said earlier, be prepared to like give a what you call it, a comforting answer back.
So, or sometimes just being able to say, wow, I may be the cause of the stress, or I may be contributing to the stress. And so when we ask for the man in our life, whether it be our children or our sons, our brothers or husbands, that when we ask a question, be prepared for the answer that may not be cookie cutter and maybe warm and fuzzy, but be willing to really embrace the answer, and not become defensive. If I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
Got you. Dr. Ray, I mean, we're here hitting on an hour in this discussion. I know it's so much. We could have a part 3, 4, 5, and 6
just sample
just on this topic. We may need to come back. Yeah, we may need to come back and do this again, because I think, we have more, like you said, so much more that we can cover. But if you had a final thought that you can give the sisters, the girls and the women of our community, to empower and educate us as it relates to the men and their mental health, what would that be?
Okay. First, alhamdulillah, I want to thank the brothers for all of the wisdom that they've shared. This has been amazing. Yeah. You brothers are so insightful, alhamdulillah. I'm so impressed, and mashallah. But number one, tell your man you got his back. You know what I mean? Tell him, no matter what, I got your back. That is so important for him to feel that sense of security with you, right? And then listen. As your son said, listening is two things. Listen to the words that come at you, and then repeat back the words that you hear.
To paraphrase, to see, did I interpret it the way you should? No, don't do that.
Don't paraphrase.
Okay.
What I hear you saying is, that's the beginning of your sentence.
Got you.
And the rest of your sentence should be the things that he said.
Got you.
And this is a relationship activity I do with couples, because they need to learn how to do it too. But for a woman to do that with the man, very important. Okay. Right? Then take care of what he told you. Never use it against him. Right? Never use it against him. If
Alex,
you want
it's dark in there. You need to turn the light on.
Yeah, my fault. Give me a second.
Can't see you. Go ahead, Dr. Ray.
Sorry. Dark over here.
If you have something to talk to him about, try to talk to him outside of the moment of the issue. Right? Don't talk to him when he's in the middle of the thing that's going on. right? Outside of it, if you have a concern, that's another thing. But then the last thing is like, men are physical, show them love and affection, give him a hug. If he's going through something, give him a hug. And let him know I'm with you. Like I see what you're going through. I'm with you. You know what I mean? It's not lost on me. I'm a witness to it. I appreciate it. I'm thankful for you. Because men, we go through a lot too, as husbands, as men, as brothers, as sons, fathers, uncles, all of that, and we don't get it acknowledged, and so we feel like alone in our struggle a lot of times. Not to say that we feel unappreciated, we just feel alone. And that's
So can I ask
pretty
you a
much
question,
it.
Dr. Ray? Is that
Sure.
something that we as women and the young girls in our communities, is that something that we should do more often? Is articulate our gratitude for even the little things. Does that open up dialogue to be vulnerable?
Yes, because secret appreciation destroys relationships. Any kind of relationship.
Say that again. That's one of those you got to repeat moments. They got put that on repeat. Say that
again. Secret appreciation destroys relationships. Right? Where I appreciate my wife to the end of the world. I never tell her. And she appreciates me to the end of the world, and she never tells me. I appreciate my kids to the end of the world, and I never tell them. And then Jamie Foxx has a video about this, where no, I don't think it was D.L. Hughley, right? Where on his father's deathbed, that his father finally said he was proud of me, said he fell apart. Right?
I remember that. Yeah.
We can't. Don't do that, because we're gonna fill in the blank. I'm gonna fill in the blank, and don't leave it up to me with my insecurity to fill it in.
Wow. Oh, we got to have a part 2, brothers.
Yes.
I'm just saying, we got to have a part 2, because brother, you dropping on the 1 hour. We're dropping some serious stuff. I'm like, man, this can't just end with this conversation. My goodness. You know what I'm saying? We're out.
Drop mic.
Exactly. Drop mics. Right. We can't. I mean, so if I'm hearing you, what I'm hearing, did I say that right?
Yes. What I heard you say is.
See, I'm learning. So what I heard you say is, be open to hearing things that is not necessarily what we may want to hear, but it's the truth. Yeah. It's their truth. Yeah. Be willing to do that. Be willing to.
My truth is mine.
Right, and your truth is yours. Be open to listening, active listening, and not interpreting what we think or putting a spin. Well, I think what he's really saying is this. Take it on face value that what he said is what he said, and that's what it is. You're saying also, Dr. Ray, is for us women to be able to be more and to support and contribute to a healthy mental health, healthy state for our men, is to also say what I just said. So what I heard you say is so-and-so, to make sure that we have a meeting of the minds, and that what I heard is exactly what it is that you said to me. 4 is sharing our appreciation, even for the little things. Just saying I appreciate you, because unheard appreciation is not what, that's not what we want to be. We want to be able to express that, and that opens up the dialogue for vulnerability and for that person to be able to share what they're going through, which is obviously going to help them to be in a good mental state. Wow. So that was 5 gems that was just dropped, like literally, throughout this conversation. I would love, brothers, if this is possible, I would love for us to come back. I will give some dates where you can come back next month. This is the ending of April, to come back and share some more things as it relates to physical health, eating, like Dr. Ray was talking about the eating, how we women can contribute to that, maybe doing things together to be able to build the mental health of the men in our communities and in our families. Is that something that you brothers are open to?
I'm down.
A part 2?
Yes, ma'am.
Love it. Well, I want to thank you. I know we're getting ready to break our fast, so I don't want to keep anybody I want to make this is, for those that are watching the show that are not familiar with us, maybe what we're talking about as it relates to fasting. We are in the month of Ramadan, which is the month where Muslims fast for basically an entire month. And the last, minutes before breaking fast is a beautiful time for us to make a personal prayer to Allah, God, for forgiveness and for just the blessings and for acceptance of the fast and the sacrifice that we're making, not for, for God's benefit, but for our own. So I don't want to hold anybody with that, but I want to thank each and every one of you. I mean, 5 gems. I'm going to write them down in the comments, when this goes live. So for those who were not able to, they can write it down. And women, this is a moment we are good talkers. We're good nurturers because we have, God has gifted us with the gift of gab, but sometimes we have to utilize the gift of listening, active listening. And our brothers said what they said, and we need to take it for just that, what they said tonight. So I'm going to write that down. I want to thank you, Alex. Yes, yes. I want to thank you, Alex, coming and giving us the millennial perspective of it, young and still developing. Khalil, brother Khalil, always great talking with you and bringing that perspective of growth and still growing and being able to say, I'm still growing and learning. That's just phenomenal. And Dr. Ray, I can't express enough the gems that you dropped today from a psychological standpoint, which is something that we are, men included, may not understand the dynamics of that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. For the viewers there, thank you for tuning in to another episode, a special edition of Conversations with Asia. We're going to bring the brothers back on, so stay tuned for the new dates for that. Please go onto our YouTube page under Asia Nasir Shahid. Hit the subscribe button and like this video if you found benefit in it. Share it, spread it, because sharing is caring. And thank you all again for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with Asia. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings to everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.
Bye.